Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from August 22nd to the 28th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And we're going to start with this article from Green Market Report, as it points out the obvious that cannabis consumption is on track to beat alcohol. Hey, guess what, Schmuck Schumer? People like cannabis, and so happy to share that consumption is high. So I'm going to go through some of this. BDS analytics data showed that this past spring, 51% of Americans in adult use states claimed to have consumed cannabis in the past 6 months, up 15% from spring of 2020. And at the same time, the share who claimed to be rejectors, non-consumers, who are not open to consuming in the future, fell from 31% in spring 2020 to just 23% in spring 2022. I guess when people get bored, they might change their mind and try something that's legally available and becoming more popular. As overall consumer participation is lower in medical markets, yet BDS analytics data suggests that consumer participation is growing at a similar rate. The share of those who report past 6 months consumption ballooned from just 26% to 41% between spring 2020 and spring 2022, as the share of rejectors fell from 34% to again 28% over the same period of time. And these realities have left many companies considering what they can learn from the alcohol industry or how they can partner as it continues to languish within its own prohibition. So that's all I'm going to read for this, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read more, as there is quite a bit more to this article, but just highlighting that obviously this trend is positive, heading in the right direction as more people are taking a liking to cannabis. And with that, just wanted to highlight again the benefits of natural medicine versus the traditional sin substances that our culture loves to throw at us to mask our pain, mainly alcohol and opioids. But clearly the status quo comes at a cost, as alcohol costs the American healthcare system $23 billion and kills 95,000 Americans annually. And to think, alcohol is legal, cannabis is not. Yet, there is evidence, and it keeps building, that natural drugs like cannabis and psilocybin are not only better alternatives, but actually also help people eliminate drinking habits or come off of whatever addiction that they have, like cigarettes as well. And so yeah, these are miracle drugs. And so while the problem continues to grow as the data piles up, fortunately, decision makers can't ignore these truths much longer. And so just wanted to share this to build off of the last one, as it again does shut the prohibitionists up when we look into it, as Marijuana Moment highlights psychedelic use increasing among adults, but decreasing for teens, new federally funded studies find. So happy to share this. I'll put the article below if you wanted to read it. Our findings of a decline in hallucinogen use among adolescents aged 12 to 17 between 2022 and 2014, and then 2015 and 2019 are important to them. And so again, as this data sounds positive, hopefully we can see some decisions being made that change the status quo for the better and give people access to these safer, non-addictive alternatives. Hopefully we can start with cannabis and then we can get them into the psychedelics. But on top of that, I just wanted to share this funny one from High Times, because of course, people with first-hand experience more likely to perceive pot positively. Like, obviously, kind of like how people who exercise see the benefits of exercise, or people who don't drink also see the positive benefits. And so I'm not going to go through this whole one, but just going to share the clip as this little snippet, as the latest Gallup poll indicates that 70% of Americans who have tried cannabis thinks its effects of users on positive, because they're not bought into the old brainwashing propaganda still. And so there's more down here if you just wanted to pause to read. I'm just going to leave it at that. Otherwise, you can grab the link below and read through it more. But some good news from Marijuana Moment, as Senator hopes to pass key reforms on cannabis this year, but says full legalization is a difficult feat. And don't we all know this? We're not expecting full legalization, but if everything plays out, safe plus some sort of incremental alternative, we can possibly end up seeing, just based on what we're seeing here. And so just to go through it, Wyden hasn't been quite as vocal as Schumer and Booker about plans to pursue alternative incremental legislation. But in a statement to the American Prospect that was published on Thursday, the senator tempered expectations about the prospects of CAOA. We're expecting all along. A 50-50 Democratic majority in the Senate will make passing our bill a difficult feat, because not even all the Dems are behind it. But I hope we can, at a minimum, pass some key reforms this Congress, he said. So nice to hear Ron Wyden speaking up after so long of being silent, but this is a winning issue that is overwhelmingly backed by the American people, especially young voters who understand how ridiculous and unfair it is for folks to be locked away for something that most states have legalized and almost everyone thinks should be legal. And so, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. But in any case, in an ideal world for the senators, they would be able to secure the votes and do what the House has done twice at this point, pass legislation to end federal prohibition. Too bad the House passing legislation really doesn't mean anything. But even getting all 50 Democrats on board with the bold reform is in doubt, because the reform sucks. So to say nothing of the concerted opposition it would likely face from the GOP side of the aisle. And so the sponsors recognize the political reality, thank goodness, which is why Schumer has been in talks with bipartisan and bicameral offices about introducing what would effectively be a cannabis omnibus of modest reforms. And so we do love to hear it, as this is sort of what we expected them to pivot to over time as they continue to delay. So we'll leave it at that. Of course, this is not advice. Plan accordingly for your own situation, but we do love to hear that as we head into the fall. And so with that, wanted to share this one from Marijuana Moment as we got some news out of New York. Here's how many cannabis shops New York plans to approve in each region of the state in the first licensing round. And so as opposed to actually, approving these shops, they're just going to tell us how many they intend to approve. Goddamn virtue signalers. They're so annoying in New York. And so this is just the first step towards launching recreational cannabis sales, which was legalized a year and a half ago. And so clearly you're not helping the minority small business owners or the minority entrepreneurs in your state by delaying this far, regardless, with regulators showing their commitment to promoting industry equity by prioritizing people who have been directly impacted by the war on drugs. Applications for additional retailers will be more broadly accepted in the future. But for now, OCM has provided a geographical breakdown of the maximum number of conditional adult use licenses dispensaries, CAURD. They love making these little acronyms. Up to 150 licenses will be awarded across 14 regions of the state, with most concentrated in New York City boroughs like Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Long Island. And so you can pause to get the most out of this little chart here that they've put together for you to show where this is all going. And so the primary goal of the CAURD license is to create opportunities for New Yorkers harmed most by the prohibition of cannabis, of course. Aaron Gittleman, a spokesperson for OCM, told Cannabis Moment, part of that is granting up to 150 licenses to individuals who themselves or their close family members have had past eligible cannabis-related offenses and have ownership stakes in profitable businesses. Can you just stop talking and get these licenses out already so that they can open their shops and so you can legally supply the demand in New York? People who've received licenses will be able to access a $200 million social equity cannabis fund and also be eligible for turnkey storefronts currently being secured and built out by Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. And so we'll see how this plays out over time. Obviously, they expect it to go well, but chances are in the real world doesn't always plan out the way that they expect it to. So this first in the nation fund will give these entrepreneurs the capital necessary to compete in New York's adult use cannabis market. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with this New York and their very ambitious social equity plans. And so you can pause to read for more information about that, or you can grab the whole article below if you wanted to learn more. So with that though, apparently from this New York Times article, New York medical cannabis giants struggle to break into rec market. Obviously, because New York sucks, the regulators are taking their sweet ass time and not allowing the industry to get the ball rolling and flourish just yet. But apparently, there's also going to be a hefty fee, and so just wanted to share ironies of potential large adult use fee setting up battle with MSOs. Apparently, it could be upwards to $20 million an MSO, which honestly, it's really chump change for the the tier 1 MSOs. Not even the tier 2. It's a little much to cough up. But main thing, just to highlight what Merida Capital Holdings summarizes here is 1. Each retail outlet gets 3 adult use dispensaries, and then he poses the question: who's going to fill those shelves for the next few years if MSOs with the massive cultivation capacity refuse to pay the $20 million fee? Fair question. And then second, New York starts reimbursing medical cannabis on 4/23, I believe, so that might be April 2023. Potential dimensions of true medical market are huge. And so I do apologize as I do not have access behind the paywall. I've not read the article. I will put it in the description below if you wanted to try and check it out. But just to finish off what Merida Capital started. So if the state tries to hardball MSOs, it runs the risk that they withhold the fee, sell adult use from other producers in their 3 dispensaries while aggressively courting medical markets until state relents and lowers fees, since MSOs are the only scaled operations for at least the next 2 years in the state. That is, if the goal truly is to transition illicit market sales into a regulated market, something that the commission talks about, but as of now have not taken actions consistent with that goal. And so I agree with Joe and Rancho here. New York will be banging on the MSO's door to bail them out of this SE debacle, crazy game of poker, and I do definitely think that this top-down obsessing about control is not going to be able to compete with building an industry from the ground up like we've seen in other successful Western markets and other even Eastern Coast markets that haven't focused so much on the social equity. So New York will be interesting, but with that, just wanted to share this snippet from Reckless Cheerleader. So thank you for sharing this one as I bring you down to the snippet from an investment firm. And while he does not share the source, take it with a grain of salt because I don't know exactly who it comes from, but it does give you a lot more information on the New York situation if you don't have the paywall to get behind the New York Times article as well. And so the one main snippet I will read out of this one is investment summary. It remains unclear that New York State will be a significant source of upside for MSOs at this point, and the recent rally in stocks notwithstanding, mainly because, namely, A, rec sales may begin well before the medical incumbents can sell rec at their own stores. Note, MSOs do not yet know when and where they will be allowed to sell rec because the regulators in New York suck. B, with only 3 rec stores per MSO incumbent, and that seems to be like a new development, which the MSOs are not going to like, and I imagine they might challenge it, these could quickly be diluted in a market of 3,000 stores. Yes, individual store success will come down to location, services, and assortment, but as of yet, there are no stores. And C, on the cultivation side, it is unclear if they will have the capacity limit, whether they will be able to cultivate as well as process, and whether they will be able to supply third-party dispensaries directly or have to go through distributors. And then D, for the time being, hemp growers are receiving cultivation and processing licenses. We think this will mean plenty of supply of derivatives with inexpensive distillate, leaving room for the MSOs to focus more on cultivating premium flower, better economics, and maybe buying white label derivatives and selling under their own brands. Good if the brands can sustain premiums, a big if. And so I'm just going to leave that there if you wanted to pause and read through, but that is the last update out of New York. And so as we move on to Florida, this one comes out of the Office of Medical Cannabis Use, looking at this past week. So we can see new dispensaries open from this week of August 22nd to the 26th. We see that Sunnyside opened a new one in Tampa, backed by Cresco Labs. Jungle Boys, I do apologize as I do not know who backs Jungle Boys or Green Dragon, but they opened new locations in Palatka. That was for Green Dragon, and then Jungle Boys opened one in Orlando. And so looking at the qualified patient count, they increased their qualified count up to 745,259 patients, which represents week over week increase of 1,792. So good to see the number of patients signing back up again, going up. And over the 1,000 mark. So if we scroll down, we can see the dispensations for August 19th to the 25th, and we can see all the MSOs listed in the state. We can see the number of dispensary locations that they operate, the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, the number of milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and the number in ounces of smokable flower sold this past week. So all the data is right here for you, and Florida does put these out weekly. The good news is that we have Pierre, Gilles at compound value 87 that makes this great Florida THC market share comp sheet top 8, and this is updated as of yesterday, I believe, or a few days, or yeah. This is updated, and so we've got Trulieve number 1 still, losing a bit of market share though, as there's a lot more people biting at their ankles, followed by Curaleaf, Liberty Health Sciences, Move backed by Vereno, Soterra Wellness, Fluent, Grow Healthy, and Vitacan. So you can pause to read just for more information or look through that if you want to take a deep dive into this breakdown. And so more state news. Tom Engel shares big news out of California as lawmakers sent Governor Gavin Newsom bills to authorize interstate cannabis commerce, seal cannabis conviction records, and facilitate industry insurance coverage. So steps in the right direction, hopefully for California. Several other reform measures are also advancing as the session comes to a close. And so I will go through this deeper once he signs the bill and it becomes effectively becomes law. But more information, if you wanted to read about California, I'll put this article down in the description. While good news out of Pennsylvania, thank you, Joe Greisler, for sharing this one, as the Pennsylvania Department of Health withdrew its appeal to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to recall various vaporized medical cannabis products after a half-year pushback from the Advocacy Network, Medical Cannabis Access, and Patient Safety. Great cannabis win. So thank you, Joe, for sharing this story. Take that, Pennsylvania Department of Health. And then we've got another one from Marijuana Moment, as apparently Nebraska officials will take a second look at signatures for rejected medical cannabis ballot measures. And so while we like to hear this, hopefully they might find something that they missed before, and this would lead to Nebraska seeing something on their ballot for medical cannabis. Unlikely, but at least it seems like they're listening to activists' concerns, as we believe that it's essential that every signature from every Nebraskan be counted. Of course, they put in a lot of work. It's worth at least hearing them out and seeing whether they collected them or not. And so I will update you. And hopefully we do get some positive news out of Nebraska after all of the delays and the unfortunate ballot reversal. And so with that, Dennis Rudolph does share some news out of New Jersey as the legal cannabis market posts strong sales in first 3 months after launch. So while we've gone through this before, just wanted to highlight New Jersey pulled in a whopping $200 million in adult use and medical in sales from April 21, 2022, the first day of the rollout of the legal cannabis market to the period ending of July 31st, 2022. While other key findings about the New Jersey market include dollar sales have seen a compound monthly growth rate of approximately 10% from May to July 2022. 50% of those surveyed in New Jersey claim to be past 6 months consumers, while flower typically holds an approximate 40% share of dollar sales in other markets, but made up about 50% of dollar sales. So happy to see some positive trends coming out of New Jersey as that market will continue to grow and head in the right direction. While Dennis Rudolph shares a few more, latest report by New Frontier Data highlights the importance of federal cannabis legalization. And obviously this should have been done decades ago. We're still chipping away and making this fight happen, hopefully sooner than later. But obviously even just descheduling cannabis from the CSA would solve so many domestic issues. But regardless, number of new jobs, at least 1 million people can get jobs. At least 1 million. I'm sure there would be a lot more if we would see federal legalization. That could be created, makes it worth without a doubt, let alone tax inflows into the states and the federal budget. So I'm not going to go through all these, but you can pause to read Cannabis, the Facts and Figures. And again, this is from a recent New Frontier Data report. So you can pause to read as well. This one you can pause to read. And then lastly, you can pause to read this one as well. So many jobs, simply so much potential to be unlocked. And sadly, the longer the U.S. takes, they're really just shooting themselves, and especially the American people, in the foot. So with that, we got the last one from Zane Stedman. So thank you, Zane, for sharing this one, but he does not cite the source, so just take this with a grain of salt. But I thought it was quite interesting and worth sharing, as he included a column for cash conversion cycle with the most recent comp set, but wanted to dissect further, can get a glimpse of who's the best in class, leanest operators are here. And so we've taken a look at working capital days across MSOs, using metrics based on Q1 2022 and Q2 2022 averages. And so finished goods inventory days, from my understanding, this is the number of days it takes for the MSOs to cultivate a large batch of cannabis and then sell it. So we got, the MSO on the left here, quickest to sell it all versus the MSOs that take the longest time to sell it. Possible, depends on how big the basket size of cultivation is, but that's essentially what this says, I think. And also, if I am wrong here, please let me know in the comments, because I'm going based off of what I believe that they are, and I did look it up beforehand, but accounts receivable days, from my understanding, this is the number of days on average it takes for the MSOs to receive payment from the clients that they work with. So Trulieve gets payments the quickest, Cresco Labs gets payments the longest. But at least the good thing is it's only 19 days and not like, a month or 2 months, on the far end here. So total inventory days, I think this is the amount of days it would take them to sell the inventory that they have on hand left. And so GTI has the least amount of inventory, whereas Curaleaf has the most, and that would make a lot of sense. Well, lastly, the accounts payable days, from my understanding, is the number of days of credit that an MSO has remaining in order for them to pay off their clients that they work with, their suppliers, and their vendors as well. So you can pause to read, but very interesting breakdown to see how the MSOs are doing, especially the best-in-class performers. Well, some MSO news, got this one from GTI's. Rise Dispensaries announces premier sponsorship of Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project, as Rise Dispensaries, backed by GTI, urges consumers to roll up to the polls for cannabis policy reform across the nation. So love to see GTI getting behind this and spreading awareness, as GTI today announced that Rise Dispensaries will serve as a premier sponsor of Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project, so obviously helping fund this initiative to try and get many people to show up as possible, which aims to register and inform voters who support cannabis policy reform. So love to see this, and of course the more efforts we can see, the better. Ahead of this year's midterm elections, Headcount and Rise Dispensaries are teaming up to encourage voters to roll up to the polls through Cannabis Voter Project resources, now available at all Rise branded locations and online at here. And so I will put this resource in the description if you wanted to check it out, but just more information about this initiative if you wanted to pause to read. Well, this interesting one from Adweek, Cannabis Titans troll each other over knockoff brand. And so this one is quite funny. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, just going to show you what Green Thumb put together for their pre-rolls a long time ago versus what Trulieve seems to have recently put together for their True Roll brand. And so, of course, the social media scuffle highlights the ongoing challenge in protecting weed's intellectual property, but from my understanding, as someone that has used Canva in the past for graphic design, they both look like just stock images you're going to get out of Canva, a very popular graphic design tool. So no doubt you're going to have people running into possible very similar looking intellectual property or just preset titles for possible brand images. And so you can grab the whole thing if you wanted to read through it. But interestingly enough, this starts with Dog Walker's pre-roll. So I think this is Green Thumb tweeting out, quickly makes a Twitter account before someone else does at Trulieve. And so this is the original from Green Thumb, and this has been their brand for a long time. And I guess this is a new brand from Trulieve. So they definitely look very similar. This is not a great look on Trulieve. Do you think Green Thumb might try and take legal action? Or do you think this tweet was embarrassing enough for Trulieve to back this up, put their tail between their legs, and consider rebranding their pre-rolls? What do you think? And then lastly, for MSO news out of Oregon Live, as Curaleaf agrees to Oregon suspension and fine after cannabis production fiasco mixed up THC and CBD. And so they did get away with paying a lot less than we might have thought that they might have. Cannabis retailing giant Curaleaf has agreed to a $130,000 fine and a 23-day suspension to resolve state regulators' investigation into the company's manufacturing blunder last summer. And hey, companies make mistakes. At least they're trying to do better and not make the same mistake again. And at least, hey, taking too much cannabis can't kill you. That's the main thing. The Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission says Massachusetts-based Curaleaf shipped 1,500 mislabeled drops under the brand name Select, many of which it recalled at the state's discretion, but many of the bottles reached consumers, and several customers reported alarming symptoms after consuming what they believed were benign CBD drops. And of course, when you get THC instead, it's not going to make for a good time, but at least no one was really in harm's way and no one was going to die. And so apparently Oregon regulators originally proposed slapping Curaleaf with a 70-day suspension and record $200,000 fine. Curaleaf challenged the penalty and the regulatory ultimately agreed to reduce the penalty to $130,000 with a 23-day suspension. As regulatory staff credited Curaleaf with extraordinary cooperation and said the companies demonstrated its violations weren't intentional or persistent. As hey, companies can make mistakes, at least they're trying, and it seems the intention is there, as Curaleaf can reduce its suspension by 11 days if it pays an additional $2,750 civil penalty. Must be nice to know the rules of the law and operate as a company sometimes, because clearly it seems like Curaleaf is getting off kind of easy on this one, but good job Curaleaf for, fighting, using the law and getting the right verdict. And so lastly, our last few stories, Puff Daddy shares cannabis use 20% more frequently in states that legalize recreational use. Study finds Duh! Especially when people have confidence that they can buy from legal, safe dispensaries where they know what they're buying. And so, not going to go through this article. It is behind a paywall as well, but I will put the Forbes one down there if you wanted to tune in and read a little bit about it. Well, some good news is apparently the Spanish government gives green light to medical cannabis, which we love to hear as more countries are becoming more cannabis friendly in Europe. Cannabis-based preparations with different THC CBD ratios will be made in pharmacies for individual patients. And so, until now, patients have found themselves in a rather gray legal hinterland. Some were able to access cannabis from the plethora of clubs dotted around the country, or if so inclined, they could risk growing their own cannabis plants as long as they weren't visible to the public. And meanwhile, the government was happy to issue licenses to a number of Spanish producers for the cultivation of medical-grade cannabis, but only for export to other countries such as Germany, Poland, and the UK as of right now. So a lot more room to go, but what changes? Flower and pharmacies potentially, as they specify that cannabis-based preparations, including magistral formulas with different THC and CBD ratios made on-site in pharmacies for individual patients, will be prescribed by specialist doctors and dispensed by hospital pharmacies, although Guzman and his observatory colleagues hope this will be extended to general practitioners and community pharmacies as well, because why would you want to have to go to a hospital to get your cannabis when you can get it from the community pharmacy? Less clear is whether cannabis flowers, which are not explicitly mentioned in the draft, will be included in the program. Would be great if they would, raising concerns amongst patients, many of whom vaporize cannabis flower to manage breakthrough pain and nausea, about future access through regulated channels. And so while this is a positive step in the right direction, still a long ways to go in Spain. And so more information if you wanted to read the whole article down below. Well, lastly, just happy to share a new study from High Times. Sharing new study shows evidence that low-dose THC can help treat veterans' PTSD. And so while the evidence continues to mount, the more the merrier. New researchers have found further evidence that cannabis, specifically THC in low doses, can be an effective treatment for PTSD. And so a study published in the journal Neuropharmacology by researchers from Wayne State University showed evidence of low doses of THC helping treat those who suffer from PTSD. The study, officially named Cannabinoid Modulation of Brain Activation During Volitional Regulation of Negative Effect in Trauma-Exposed Adults, aimed to learn more about how THC affects certain parts of the brains. And while many studies on the effects of cannabis and PTSD have come before this, one is one of the first to explore how THC affects the corticolimbic brain activation. And so this was a double-blind study that featured 51 participants. Each one was given either a 7.5 milligram THC capsule or placebo. And participants were scanned by an fMRI machine, and researchers asked questions about their emotions. Researchers found that the brain activity of those consuming THC were different than the placebo group, specifically in the angular gyrus, which is related to functions such as attention or spatial cognition, and posterior cingulate cortex, related to conditions such as depression, Alzheimer's disease, and traumatic brain injury. Together, these findings suggest that THC may prove to be beneficial pharmacological adjunct to cognitive appraisal therapy in the treatment of PTSD, researchers concluded. So we love to hear that. So while there's a lot more here, I'm just going to stop it. You can pause to read, or you can grab the link in the description. But as evidence mounts, we love to see it as we get closer to hopefully ending cannabis prohibition, possibly descheduling cannabis, or at least seeing the Dems do something, keep some of their campaign promises, and pass incremental safe from now until November. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.